the nominee for Deputy Attorney General. Barbara, hold tight. Let's listen in.
But I don't recall any such meetings, no.
Okay. When were you first in contact with the Attorney General about your nomination? Have you ever spoken to the Attorney General about the question of Russian contacts with presidential campaigns?
My first contact with Attorney General Sessions, I believe, was approximately November 28th when I received a phone call from him. I don't believe I ever had any direct contact with Senator Sessions prior to that date. No, I've had no conversations with Attorney General Sessions about that matter.
About the Russian contacts?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any basis on which you would not be able to handle such these investigations, given that the Attorney General Sessions has announced his intention to recuse?
Senator, I'm not aware of any. I should tell you, of course, since I'm not involved in the matter, I don't know what, if any, investigation is currently ongoing within the department. So if I were confirmed, I would need to familiarize myself with the facts. I would need to consult with experts in the department. We have a complex set of rules and statutes that govern recusals. And so I'm not aware of any requirement for me to recuse at this time. But as a lawyer, Senator, I would have to know what it is I'm recusing from. And as a Department of Justice official, I'd have to rely on the advice I got from the career staff. We have folks who are trained to do just that.
I hope this next question is not an impossible one. How would you handle such an investigation? Have you ever discussed with the Attorney General the appointment of a special prosecutor to handle such an investigation?
Well, how I would handle an investigation, Senator, is the way I would handle any investigation. As far as I'm concerned, every investigation conducted by the Department of Justice is an independent investigation. We prosecute tens of thousands of people every year, and every one of those defendants deserves an independent prosecutor. And so I would be certain that we had independent investigators to conduct those investigations, along with law enforcement agents who are trained to conduct their investigations in an appropriate way and comply with the statutes, the regulations, the Constitution, and the policies of our law enforcement agencies. And so that's the way I would do that, Senator, with regard to the special counsel in this or other cases. I know this is the issue du jour on Capitol Hill, but I anticipate that if I were the Deputy Attorney General, we'd have a lot of matters coming before the department over time, and I would approach them all the same way. I would evaluate the facts and the law, consider the applicable regulations, consult with career professionals in the department, and then exercise my best judgment if I were acting Attorney General, or provide my best advice to the Attorney General if he were not recused about what I believe is the right course of action.
Yeah. I'd like to go to Ms. Brand now and ask you about your work at the Chamber of Commerce. When you worked there, your client, of course, was that chamber. In that capacity, you signed a number of briefs opposing the positions of government agencies. Of course, at the Department of Justice, your job will be to defend these agencies and their missions. Can you discuss how you will approach that from a different angle?
Sure, Senator Grassley, I would be happy to. As you say, as a lawyer, I have spent some of my career in private practice representing clients. I've, of course, spent more of my career in public service of one type or another. But just as when I was at a law firm, when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, I had a client, the Chamber of Commerce. And as a litigator there, my job was to file lawsuits and file amicus briefs on behalf of that client. If I'm confirmed to this position, of course, I'll have a very different role. I'll have a different client. My client will be the United States, and my role will be to serve the public interest and the interests of justice, representing that client as best I can. That's a role I'm very comfortable with. As I said, I've spent more of my career in public service than in private practice, and I would be honored to take that role back on if I'm confirmed.
Back to Mr. Rosenstein. You served as an associate independent counsel, and of course, you've already referred to the decades of experience you've had in the department. So you're familiar with the role of independent counsels or special prosecutors in federal investigations. Appointment of a special counsel requires both that there's evidence of a crime or wrongdoing and that the department is unable to handle the matter fairly. Is that right, as you see it?
Generally, that's correct. I believe what you're referring to is the Department's regulation on special counsels as opposed to the independent counsel statute, which sunsetted in 1999. It would require, under the current regulation, a determination by the Attorney General or the Acting Attorney General. Number one, that a criminal investigation of a person or matter is warranted. Number two, that there is a conflict of interest for the Department to conduct that investigation. And number three, that the public interest justifies the appointment of a special counsel.
Okay. Let me ask the question, but I think you just answered it. But if you want to say more, how would you decide whether a special prosecutor would be appropriate in a particular department investigation?
Well, whatever it is, Senator, and there are various formulations of this. As was mentioned in the introduction, I was specially designated by Attorney General Holder to conduct a sensitive investigation. I wasn't technically a special counsel under that regulation, but the bottom line is, Senator, that it's my job to make sure that all investigations are conducted independently, and whether it's a law or a statute or some other mechanism, I would ensure that every investigation is conducted independently.
My time's up. I have 2 more points on that question, but I'll do that in the second round. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rosenstein, earlier this year, the entire United States intelligence community made public its assessment that Vladimir Putin ordered a Russian influence campaign designed to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. The goal was to undermine public faith in the United States democratic process and to harm the campaign of Secretary Clinton in favor of President Trump. I am very concerned. I've been 6 years the chairman of the Intelligence Committee and on it for 16 years. So I've followed this closely, have had the Gang of 8 briefings, and feel very certain that the reports of the intelligence community are in fact correct. Have you read either the final classified or unclassified versions of the intelligence community's assessment regarding the Russian government's interference with the 2016 presidential campaign?
Senator, I'm certainly familiar with the issue from media accounts. I obviously have not read any classified report concerning it because it's not within my official responsibility as U.S. Attorney for Maryland. And I don't believe I've read the unclassified report. I believe I've read summaries in the media.
Well, I'm going to ask that you do that before your nomination comes up, if it does on the floor, if you will. Will you read those reports?
I think, Senator, if I were to become Deputy Attorney General, it would be essential for me to read those reports, probably the classified as well, if there is such a report. I don't think I'm authorized to do that.
Well, why don't we find out? You're number 2 now.
No.
Or will be number 2.
Yes. I think it's very important, Senator. I think that's a really valuable point, and I appreciate you raising it because the media reports actually have, I think, created some confusion about that. I am the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland. I have no role in managing the department. So,
right. No, I understand that.
Yes.
It was my fault. I misspoke. So thank you. Let me go on to the question of special counsel. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that when Valerie Plame's covert identity was revealed by someone in the Bush White House, Attorney General Ashcroft recused himself, and then Deputy Attorney General Comey promptly assigned Patrick Fitzgerald to be a special prosecutor with plenary authority to investigate and prosecute that case. Now, given the recusal by the Attorney General and the intense political interest in this matter and the strong potential that the investigation will in fact involve individuals associated with the White House, it would seem that this situation also rises to the level of extraordinary circumstances that warrant a special counsel under the regulations. Given all of this and the heightened level of distrust on all sides, do you support the appointment of an independent special counsel to look into these matters?
Senator, my understanding of this, and again, it's based solely on media accounts at this point, my understanding is that at least one of your colleagues called for a special counsel for something related to this matter while Attorney General Lynch was in office in early January, and she rejected the request. And based on the media accounts, I believe she said exactly what I said, that she had confidence in the career professionals of the department, but she had an additional piece of information. She presumably knows the facts, and I didn't, and she rejected that request. Currently, Senator, we have an acting Attorney General for this matter, Dana Bente. He was appointed U.S. Attorney by President Obama And if there were a need for special counsel, he currently has full authority to appoint one. So I don't know at this point if Attorney General Lynch or Acting Deputy Attorney General Bente are right or wrong, but I certainly wouldn't be in position to overrule them without having access to the facts that are the basis for their decisions.
So I'm trying to figure out what your bottom line is. I interpret that as a no. Is that fair?
Well, I don't know, Senator. I think the answer is I'm simply not in position to answer the question because I don't know the information that they know, the folks who are in the position to make that decision. And when I am in that position, I don't presume that Attorney General Lynch and Acting Deputy Attorney General Bente are correct. I have a lot of respect for them, but if I determine that they're mistaken, then I would overrule them.
Thank you. I understand. Ms. Brand, if I may, while at the National Chamber Litigation Center, you led regulatory litigation directed against regulations to protect workers' rights and the environment. The President has now issued 2 executive orders aimed squarely at eliminating regulations. The first requires that 2 federal regulations be identified for elimination for every new regulation. The second requires regulatory task forces in each agency to make recommendations on repealing, replacing, and modifying existing regulations. As you may know, not all of the rules required by Dodd-Frank have been finalized or fully implemented, despite the fact that it's been nearly 7 years since it became law. By one measurement, over 100 rules still remain to be finalized, nearly a third of all the rules required by Dodd-Frank. It is concerning to me that these rules may not be proposed or finalized at all under the regulatory position of this administration, simply because there aren't hundreds of others found to offset. What is the legal justification for arbitrarily failing to issue a regulation called for under law simply because there aren't 2 regulations on the books to eliminate?
Well, thank you, Senator Feinstein. I am aware of those executive orders generally. I haven't studied them as I'm not yet in the department. With respect to the executive order ordering a review of regulations on the books, my recollection is that President Obama issued something quite similar during his term in office, and I haven't studied what the results of that study were. In terms of the other executive order, again, I haven't studied it, but I think that any regulatory action taken by any agency of the government has to comply with the requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act, which require reasoned decision-making. That statute remains in place, but as to the interplay between the APA and the executive order, those decisions would fall in the first instance to the regulatory agencies themselves, but I would have to study it further.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Senator Hatch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first say that I
All right, hello everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. You have been listening to senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee questioning the nominee to be deputy under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein. He would be the man in charge of the investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia since Jeff Sessions recused himself last week. You can see where the line of questioning is going already, though he is saying he's not in the position yet. He doesn't know the facts, and so he is saying he can't answer the question about should there be a special independent prosecutor yet. We are going to discuss this in just a moment. But first, we're also following breaking news on the other side of the Hill.